Hey guys, what's up? This is the Bushido Cafe, episode 12 with my friend Adam Palmeter. And this is going to be the first episode in the Entrepreneur series, similar to how Joe Rogan does his MMA show, in addition to his podcast, and they're kind of one and the same. I want to start doing something along the same lines with either entrepreneurs or people that are self-employed, really just making life on their own terms and figuring things out. And so we'll get into that more on the episode. But yeah, Adam and I met training jujitsu here in Medellin a few months ago. And he's a traveler, has been, I think, since we met, he's been to Morocco, Mexico, Costa Rica. So he's definitely been around. And he's an artist, that's what he does to make his living as he travels. So he's definitely a really interesting guy, and I'm looking forward to this episode. Adam, do you want to go ahead and give a background on yourself and where you're from, how you got to be doing what you're doing now, and then we'll just go from there.
Yeah, cool. Thanks a lot for having me on. Like I said, my name is Adam Palmeter. I am a full-time artist and stand-up comedian. My background is actually in education. I was an early childhood educator in New York City, and then I moved to South Korea to teach there, teach English, taught all ages, and then moved on from there to Vietnam. So I've had quite a lot of experience with that. And then about 7 years ago, I started this journey going out on my own, doing this so-called digital nomad lifestyle, trying to make something out of a creative career with all of my newly found entrepreneur friends around me. A lot of people who had drop shipping businesses, Amazon, coaching, things like this, more traditional digital nomad jobs. And yeah, I've really just been kind of slowly figuring out how my creative skill set fits into the world of entrepreneurship. And that's led me around the world. So far, I've done stand-up comedy in 20 countries. And yeah, finding myself here in Costa Rica at the moment in Santa Teresa. Not a lot of comedy here, but obviously there is kind of an ebb and flow with that, depending on where I am in the world. But yeah, so far so good. And I feel like that's about me.
Yeah, well, I think you kind of touched on it there, but that's definitely not the traditional. When people say digital nomad, normally it's like maybe they do freelance work, designing web pages, or they're like, they can work remote. Now it's, that
Yeah.
remote work is, totally changing the game in the past few years, but you've obviously been doing this for several years, even before the whole COVID push for that. How is that? Do you find that to be like really challenging? I'm sure, of course, it depends on the area. Like if you're in Namibia, maybe there's not a lot of opportunity for stand-up comedy there. But how has that process been since you started? Like in the beginning, where you're just like, well, I'm here teaching English in Southeast Asia, which I would say, that's kind of more typical thing someone would do. What prompted you to go from, hey, I'm teaching but I'm also an artist and I have this skill set and I'm a comic and I have this skill set. How did you make that leap? Because to me, as a traveler, that to me seems to be the biggest leap of like, yeah, for sure, I can go teach English in Southeast Asia, or anyone could do that, which is great. It's cool. But how did you make that leap to go, you know what, like I'm gonna do something different and really break off into this more entrepreneurial path?
Yeah. So true, there are a lot of challenges. Like I mentioned, it's kind of a difficult path to be a creative from really anywhere. I know, especially depending on what kind of creativity you're into. For example, I'm a mural painter, which actually helps me travel because I'm not always hunting down big canvases. I don't have a studio, so wherever I go, I can usually find some paints and a wall. And that's really how I've been able to scratch that itch, so to speak. Comedy, yes, true. It is difficult to always find places to perform stand-up in these corners of the world. However, most large cities have a large expat community. So there's kind of already this, English speaking community in place. Medellin was no different. There is, plenty of expats who are living there. And there's also plenty of people who are learning English or have learned English. So it was really kind of that aspect. If it's not a comedy club or like a show that's already going on there, you kind of have to make your own. So in Medellin, for example, I did this where I find a bar that usually a pub quiz night. That's usually the telltale sign. If they have a pub quiz or a music open mic, or some place that just has acoustic music, in the evening time, that usually means they have a microphone and a stage. That's really all you need for comedy to happen. And I would say that when I'm constantly traveling without an art studio, if I'm constantly traveling without having book shows for comedy, it's really up to me to utilize network. And I think that's probably the strongest skill I have when it comes to entrepreneurship is, as we all know, it's not what you know, but who you know. And so I'll back up a little bit. When I had left South Korea, this is about 10 or so years ago, I moved back to New York City, and I was about 3 years into comedy. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do comedy at night, and then I'm going to be selling my artwork on the street during the day. And I had this really romantic view of like that New York artist dream. And New York delivered in the way that it just breaks your fucking heart, like, because one, for the comedy, it's no one's moving to Des Moines for comedy, no one's moving to Orlando, they're moving to New York or Los Angeles. And so you really have the cream of the crop in terms of highest level creatives, the funniest people in the world, and you see them really slugging it out, trying to get on different shows or even just going to open mics. And there's so much incredible competition that I had to really realize, like, okay, what is my place here? It's like, I didn't want to be on TV. I didn't want to, do the Comedy Central thing. So I use this as an excuse to just start my own show and kind of be an active tourist with comedy. So I'd met all the comedians I wanted to meet. I had a weekly show every Tuesday in Brooklyn. And I was able to just kind of hang out with all the comedians I wanted to hang out with. And using that network afterwards, I was able, as I traveled, most of these higher level comedians have been around the world. They know people who know people. So whenever I went abroad, different countries in Europe or something, then I could call on these people, hey, who do you know for a show? And they would link me that way. So, which also, provides financial opportunities. So with New York, that helped me figure that out. Same thing with art. I was on the street. I was selling my artwork next to, people who were selling sunglasses, or some dude was just selling pictures of a snake. Like he had just gotten out of jail. And then the first day he came out of jail, and he had like maybe 9 or 10 suits that he was just hanging up on, like the closed grates in front of the storefronts that were next to me. And he told me, he's like, yeah, I just got out of jail. I got to sell these suits because I want to buy a snake. And I was like, all right, this dude's got a plan, and he did. He was like, people love taking photos of people with a snake and they'll pay you for that. And he had an aggressive sales strategy where people would walk by and he was like, we should help each other. Like, you tell them to buy my suits, I'll tell them to buy your artwork. I'm like, all right, this sounds like a match made in heaven, obviously. But people would walk by and he would just shout, like, yo, look at this dude's art. Like, really aggressive. So I had to move spots the next day. But about a week or two later, I saw him with the snake. He had this little boa constrictor and people were taking photos. And I was like, man, that dude is thinking out of the box there. So maybe it's time for me to do that. And at this point in New York, I think I was back for about 2.5 years doing this. I had gone into a pretty decent amount of debt, just living that New York dream. And then I went through a bad breakup, hit I'd say bottom-ish. And then a cousin of mine was living in Saigon in Vietnam. And he said, hey, just sell all your shit and come out here. So that's what I did. And when I got there, I met a group of these digital nomads, these entrepreneurs who all mostly had online sales businesses, but they were all really into helping each other. They were all really into the idea of this of a strong network, cooperation over competition. And of course, as a comedian, when I first met them, I just started making fun of all the things they were doing. I didn't really want to take it serious or anything, except all these people are like, wow, so how do you think this would apply, in our world? Like, there's not a lot of comedy, there's not a lot of art. And they made a good point. So I found myself at a business conference in Bangkok. It's called the Dynamite Circle, which is a silly name, but it's all based off of a podcast called the Tropical MBA Podcast. And these guys have been doing this digital nomad lifestyle, remote work lifestyle for a long time, well before COVID came along and pushed a lot of people in that direction. So I volunteered at this conference in Bangkok, exposed myself to about 300 to 400 people who were, like fairly successful entrepreneurs from all different walks of life. And that's when I realized, like, oh, wow, this is actually just one giant network. I somehow convinced the two guys who were hosting the event to let me do about 10 minutes of stand-up comedy between the keynote speakers. And they had never seen me before. But in the middle of this pitch, they were debating whether or not to let me do it. A woman had approached and said, sorry, are you a comedian in Vietnam? And she had seen me perform a few months earlier and then totally vouched for me. They took a chance to let me up there. And 7 years ago, yeah. So now I've been with them as their stand-up comedy MC of the conferences in Bangkok and Mexico City, at a few different ones around the world. And just by exposing myself to all these people, meeting as many people as I can, that has truly helped me find tons of work in the world of comedy as well as art. So it's helped me to kind of develop my particular skill set, which is just this giant network of people. And now I'm actually in a position to help others as well. So if people with certain businesses or, creative issues can come to me, if I can't help them, chances are I probably know someone who can. So yeah, I'm kind of like this one strange fish in a pond of dorks. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, it's definitely, I think entrepreneurs naturally have to think out of the box, but I think once we figure out how to utilize a certain skill and realize that, this is the skill that can bring us to another level or to help someone else get to another level, then you really start to understand all the value of community. And I think, in the last several years, that's what I've been valuing really over anything. And quite recently kind of brought that mindset to the gym and training martial arts, just, learning from others. And it's of course can be competition based, but far and away, I think 99% of your time in a martial arts gym is spent, what is it, iron sharpening iron or steel sharpening steel, it really has a communal greatness that I think everyone can learn from. So I guess that's a long-winded answer.
No, dude, that is so good. Like, honestly, a really great story. And kind of fills in all the blanks of, how do you go from someone early childhood education, that's kind of one thing people will relate to most. And then teaching English in Southeast Asia, that's like the next step kind of. And then, it's like you take further steps out and out, and then you're like to get to your point. But yeah, I mean, in terms of networking, I would completely agree. I would say, like, formally, it's something I never really paid much mind to. I was more of the type of person of like, okay, I'm gonna like learn a skill and get really good at it and then just be like heads down, and I can just improve myself and get places. And I think that has its place, that attitude of like, I wouldn't say like heads down, but really just to focus on something and get good at it. Obviously, like, you do have that skill set of art and comedy that you had to develop. So, it's not just froth. It's not just foam of like, oh, I have a network, but I don't have any skills. It's kind of like, I think those things going together. But that is one thing I would say probably in the last year or two that I've realized so much is like a network is a total game changer. That's even something I mentioned in like my first podcast I made of like why I'm starting a podcast is just expanding your network. I mean, I can put a podcast out there, and even if it gets 200 views, which in comparatively speaking would be like nothing, you know, when people are getting millions of views. But if you're comparing it to not having a podcast, it's like, wow, 200 people just saw some content that I'm putting out, and hopefully you're putting out good stuff and good vibes and good energy. And then it's like, wow, you know, like 200 people just saw that. And I'm not sure if you're familiar with Jesse Itzler. He's a guy, I don't know, I think he's had made a lot of money in business. I follow him on Instagram, and I just saw something he uploaded recently saying, like, if you send 3 messages a day, whether it's like a text, a DM, or like a letter or something, to someone, that's like 900 people, or whatever, 30 times 3, 90 people in a month. You're reaching like over 1,000 people in a year. And I think that really just speaks to how you can just have these like little, like what's a couple messages a day, but you know, these little things, when you do them, like they compound over time. And I always make jujitsu analogies on the podcast, but I feel like jujitsu is just like this, because it's how do you start out as a white belt, you suck ass, and you see these people that are black belts, and you're like, well, how would I ever get there? But then you realize, like, there's not really anything special that they're doing, or, you know, maybe the top of the best guys, you know, okay, so they're like freaks, they're special and good on them. But the majority of us, to get to black belt, it's just mat time. You know, you just get in there, you do it, and you just put in your time and you make it there. And I think a skill, the same way, and even a network, it's the same way. Like, how do I expand my network? And since I started taking that more seriously, of like, it's not what you know, it's who you know, just like you said, everyone's heard that saying. But I don't know, for me, it just took a few years and growing up to realize, like, it doesn't matter if you have amazing skills. You could have some of the best skills in the world at something. If you don't have a network to leverage that, I mean, you can still do well for yourself. But I mean, the reality is, the most of us are working with normal skills, or skills that we're working on to try to improve. And so having a network, I feel like it's like the yin and yang of success. You need your skill, but you also need a network to leverage those skills. And I mean, even to relate it back to like normal life. I mean, so Carlos, you know, Carlos, he's the black belt at the gym. Like, I needed a lawyer in Panama to help me to like get some documents stamped, and he's Panamanian. So it's like, hey, do you know a lawyer? He's like, yeah, I used to be a lawyer. I know this guy, he'll help you out. And so it extends, having a network, a big, broad, useful network, extends more than even just success. It's just like, hey, I need to just get shit done. Like, who can I contact that I can help with? So yeah, I mean, just wrapping it up in terms of this being the first entrepreneur series, that's what I would tell people is, like, if you want to be an entrepreneur, like, just start working on your network in whatever that way it is. It's sending messages out. For me, part of that is like starting this podcast, and even having the podcast and inviting like my friends on. It's a way to like maintain contact and maintain that network, because it's like, otherwise it's like life, you know. Even your best friends that you grew up with, how often do you really talk to them? You know, like, maybe some people do sometimes, but the reality is pretty rarely, just because, you know, like, we're all living life, and it's just like, you text them and you're like, hey, let's talk soon. And you're like, yeah, for sure. Love you, man. You're the best. Yeah. But how do you actually, you still have to like make time and like make it happen, which can be pretty difficult. And so that's why I appreciate the podcast so much. But all that to say, network, man, network it's a changer.
Just to kind of add on what you said before about, you know, the compounding, you know, smaller thing. This is why I think even just talking to anybody, meeting anybody, I know everyone probably isn't as social as you know, a comedian, but I mean, of course, there's introverts, extroverts, but you know, going out to these conferences or even just going to comedy shows, you just put yourself in a position to meet so many people, and maybe not everyone becomes a valuable part of your network, but your network will grow, and your network is really essentially an extension of yourself to a point. You know, it's you've nurtured a relationship to a point where you know, like, oh, this person is XYZ, this person is XYZ. And it may or may not relate to your life. But like you said, when you needed a lawyer in Panama, all of a sudden, I'd like to think it's what movie is it? Like John Wick, like the first one where he opens up that wall of guns and he's just like, all these different sorts of weapons. It's kind of like that. You have that little Rolodex to look at, and you can bounce because, like you said, you don't have to be good at everything. You don't even realize to be good at one thing. As long as you figure out what other people are already good at. And just, relationship building, I think, is probably the most important thing in just about any type of business. Because I think there's probably examples where that may not be true, but few and far between. You're going to find people who it could be something as simple as office skills, or interpersonal skills in an office where it's like, okay, how horrible can you make your day? Like how you could hate that experience, and it could be based on maybe lack of communication. There's I think there's several interesting ways that we tend to fuck ourselves. I don't know if we can swear on this podcast, but
Don't swear, god damn it.
But no, I think in this I think now has never been a better chance for someone to be able to embrace this type of lifestyle of being able to travel. So much work has gone online, so much work is going remote. And I would say the biggest thing biggest positive thing someone could do is just get out, like you and me both lived in America, and wasn't for us, but I think that first time when you actually get abroad, the first time you get out of the so-called comforts and the amenities you're used to, you really challenge yourself, and you have a chance to kind of, you have to think on your feet, you have to adjust in real time. And those growing pains are very necessary. But I think, whenever I go back to the States and I'll do comedy, I meet other comedians and they're just like, wow, I could never, go somewhere or anything. And I'm like, fuck, that sucks. I know there are reasons why people don't want to go, but it tends to be, I think, my older friends too, who actually have never had, I guess, that type of opportunity, but to even try to picture what life would be like outside of what they're used to is far and away more alien than most people are comfortable with. But I think that is one of the strongest things entrepreneurs, especially ones who like to travel and challenge themselves personally, really grow. But they tend to also be the people who don't want to listen to anybody, are probably the worst employees. I am not a good employee.
Yep.
Yeah. My last education job in Vietnam, when I knew I wanted to start on this path, I had to get something to pay the bills. So I was teaching English in Vietnam, and I flat out told my boss, I'm like, man, I'm not going to work hard. I said, like, it was a private school. I had an understanding of they had a bottom line. The school really just wanted students to sign up again. I'm like, all right, we'll teach English. We'll make it fun. I'm like, but I'm probably not going to lesson plan and do that. My boss just looks at me, he's like, well, I appreciate your honesty, I guess, but and hey, I mean, I ended up having some of the highest re-enrollment of students, but I think that's more of the fact that I'm a song and dance man by trade, and that was like, let's talk about English with cool videos about aliens on YouTube. So it was like kind of like, I guess, out of the box teaching style where I don't know how stoked the parents must have been on it, but the kids like a good time.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as someone, so like I said, I wouldn't say I had particularly good interpersonal skills or communication skills per se when I was younger, but yeah, I can speak personally to like going out, traveling, and it's like iterating skill, like how to make a friend. Well, go out and travel to where you're moving to a new place every few days, every week, to a bunch of people you don't know. And it's like, I think, so when I got out of the military, it was like 23. And from then until probably like 28 or 29. So I had like a good 4 or 5 years of like some in the US, some international, but like pretty steady travel, meeting people. And I feel like that time for me, it was like the School of Hard Knocks real life university. And my soft skills, like I went from being like, I could manage myself, get around, but definitely would not have been like the most gregarious, friendly guy to like now after that experience, I feel like I'm like, yo, you could put me anywhere. You could drop me naked in the middle of any city, anywhere in the world. And within 6 months, I will like have friends. I will have a community. I will have a place to stay. I would have skills. I would have a job. I would do, I could survive anywhere. And that having that confidence is, I don't even know. It just, when you go out and do it and you conquer the unknown, and that can be anything, that can be a skill, a job, or whatever it is. Like for me, I wanted to travel. That had been a dream. I remember when like the early days of YouTube, when like stuff with people were just starting to post online, and people would be put up videos of like traveled around the world for like 1 year. And I was like a kid living on a farm in Pennsylvania, like, oh my God, that's so fucking cool. Like that would be the most amazing thing ever if I could just go and travel for a year, and then fast forward like 10 years and it's just like, oh yeah, like a year, that's just like been traveling for many years. But yeah, the traveling for me was, it would not only did it improve my soft skills, but it would just like, it opens your mind. You go from thinking like growing up in America, even just you kind of have that not rat race, but of like, school, university, job, like it's not something that anyone says per se, but it's just like this, it's just the way things are, and you naturally fall into that. And so, I mean, for me, I think going into the military was like my first like veering off that. And then from then it's just been like a continuous continual like left, hard, right. And that's been the best choice I ever made. And kind of talking on what you were saying before, one huge lesson for me has just been like, your success can depend so much on your environment. Like when I was in the military, I mean, I made it through and things went fine, and I have good and bad memories of that. It was a life experience, and I'm grateful for it. But I was never going to be successful in there because that wasn't my environment. It's like the goldfish and monkey example. Like if you test a monkey or like a fish on its ability to climb a tree, it's like, oh, well, yeah, it's garbage, but like put it in the water and it's swimming like a champ. So, and I think that's the thing some people don't realize is like they're in an environment that doesn't suit them. And so then they just think like, oh, you know what, like I'm not good at things in life, or, I'm not smart, or I'm not this or that. And it's like, well, you'd actually maybe would be really surprised at how good you are at things if you just changed up your environment. And traveling is like, it's like that over and over again. You're just changing up your environment, like boom, 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 boom. And then when I came to Colombia, for example, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna work on, really focus and work on my Spanish. And I was able to go from like a beginner, like advanced beginner level to like a very respectable advanced level in a matter of months, because I was in my environment and I was putting myself in a place where I could thrive. So that's what I would tell. I want to impress upon people that goes along with entrepreneurship is like, just because you are a garbage employee, that doesn't mean anything. Like you said, you went to your boss and said, I'm not going to be a good employee. Like you don't have to be an employee. You only have to find like one thing you're good at and then just iterate and just get good at that. So that's
oh yeah, totally, man. It's obviously the travel for both of us and our experiences, that was a very large catalyst to be able to do that. But yeah, I think just breaking routine, making yourself uncomfortable as much as you can, and I feel like that's such a popular sentiment now, especially across the Instagram, and just I think like the brand of entrepreneur. Did you hear that?
Yeah.
All right, cool. I don't know why my punk rock started.
No
Let me just shut that off. You don't like 7 seconds? All right.
7 seconds.
Pause. There we go. All right, cool. What are they talking about?
Instagram,
Instagram. Okay, yes, yeah. This brand of entrepreneurship and the lifestyle of it that has really become so popular lately. I mean, I don't think it's a mistake, but I think it's kind of started to bleed into that American culture of rat race that you mentioned before. Like
yes. I
it's
think I know
not
where you're
hard to
going with
find.
this. And but yeah, please keep going. But I think I
Oh
know.
no, I mean it just kind of thinking that I think the American kind of version of us is pretty unique. Because I mean it's not hard to find an 18-year-old who's grinding, or like a 19-year-old who's just hustle, 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 and they got all the right memes and they're, reading the right books slash podcast. And I think although that spirit of entrepreneurship is very important, it kind of gets lost in that din of the culture it's created. So I think America has probably culturally been unmatched in two things. Well, these two things I think: advertisement and entertainment. Like for as long as you can remember, the world pays attention to the entertainment of America. It's shaped cultures around the world, and I think it's only increasing. That there is no real substitute for Hollywood. And in the same way,
Got to get in those fucking Bollywood musicals.
Oh yeah, right. But I think look, the word Bollywood came from Hollywood, so it's like that right there. It's direct inspiration, and just the level of advertising that we've been so incredible at, and bringing those together, especially with now the more traditional role of the path to success in America is that high school to college to good job, wife, 3 kids and a dog, place in the suburbs. And that's been like this goal for so long. That kind of shifted, but the hustle of the goal has kind of started to shift to more like, I want to be on my own terms. I want to be, the boss. I want to be the CEO. Not even like, everyone wants to be the main person and they will cut throats on their way to get there, and there's so much of this. And I think that's, it's really starting to kind of change a bit. Let me back up a second. I think that the intensity of this hustle culture, it can lead to some good things and like amazing lifestyles, but I don't know. I start to see a whole lot of, for lack of a better word, just this like incredible toxicity of the race with no end and just sweating for the sake of sweating. And I go to a lot of these entrepreneur conferences and, I see people and they have these aha moments, they have these big business breakthroughs. And I say, like, man, all right, cool. Like, did you have a great time at this conference? Did you meet people? Yeah. Like, man, I'm just so ready to get to work, to get to the grind, to build something. And it's like, all right, cool. I start to personally question, to what end does, like, you're already a multimillionaire, like the push to just generate wealth for the sake of wealth generation, has really kind of come together with this American style of our entertainment and our just our overall culture. I don't think this is going to produce great human beings, it's just 2 weeks ago, there's a possibility that Zuckerberg and Musk will fight in the Coliseum. Like, can you think of a more perfect product besides water? Like this is, everyone will hate it and everyone will watch it. And it's like, I kind of really appreciate the full circleness of just coming back to the Coliseum and getting back to the original, which I think is probably the only sport, actual real. I mean, there's games out there. You can play a basketball game, but like if you're talking sport, it's like there's nothing more emotional or more emotionally driven or socially driven activity than two people mauling each other, for the entertainment of others.
Yeah, not just mulling each other, mulling for the attendant, for the entertainment of others. That's
Yeah,
bread and
and
circus.
just this
Bread and circus.
bread and circus. But if you just think like the two people in the Coliseum, they probably don't hang out. But you think about if they're grappling in the middle of the Coliseum, and you just think about it's probably about $400 billion sweating on each other. Just like I think Elon Musk put out a post of like I'm worth like 225 billion. He's only worth 144 billion, and it's like wow, if we come this far, like but yeah, I don't know. It's interesting to see, for better or worse, this the culture of entrepreneurship taking so many diverse paths, I guess, and leading people to where they are, even if it's in the middle of the Coliseum.
Coliseum, dude, full circle. You're
Who
worth
do you got your money on?
You're in there just sweating. I was thinking
Can you
they do it
imagine
like
how
gladiator
much?
style. There's like spikes on the walls, swords
Yeah,
to the death.
that's right. They just like have they just have like dudes from like Bing being fed to the lions, just like lesser social media icons. Who
Yeah.
do
Well,
you got your money on? Who do you think, Zuck or Elon?
I personally like Musk more, but Zuckerberg like legit trains. I think he's like even gone to some competition. So if it came down to it, but
Yeah.
I think Elon Musk, his chest cavity, like his actual chest cavity is like straight up barrel chested freedom fighter. You could like hide a couple small children inside his rib cage. I think he's just
Yeah.
massive. I
Or
don't
just the
like
one tiny child who controls him from the inside, like I think that's a little bit
black.
more realistic.
Yeah, well, it's I like that you brought up kind of like the toxic hustle culture because once again, more jujitsu analogies is like I would consider hustle as like whenever you use your strength in jujitsu. And it's kind of like, yeah, there are times when you do need to use your strength. Like you're not, if you're just like a fucking jellyfish, you're not gonna be good at jujitsu because you can't generate force. So like hustle is like that like force generation that you need. But being good at jujitsu, and the analogy is here, it's like being a successful entrepreneur is so much more than just hustle. Like it's like you can like hustle, like dig a hole, and it's like, oh, actually you're supposed to dig a hole like over there. So like all that hustle was for nothing. So it's like it's the idea of like in the military, we used to call it like all thrust, no vector. Guys that are just like fucking hoorah, they're just like get after it. But it's like if you're pointing the wrong direction, then all your hustle is like working at cross purposes and defeating and like going backwards. So it's like, and this is an analogy I made before. It's like you need to climb the mountain, that whatever mountain you're climbing, but also take the time to like look up and make sure like, okay, yeah, like, yeah, I still want to get to this mountain. And then like look over and be like, actually, you know what? Like that mountain over there looks nice. I think that would work better for me. Like maybe I'll like work over to working on this mountain. So it's not just like, I'm here, I want to get here, and I'm just gonna go ape shit to like straight line it to there. Like you should be like taking moments to like nose on the grindstone, but come up and be like, okay, is this still working for me? Do I want to change things up? Because the worst thing,
take a look around at the other people's noses, like
on, dude. Just straight fucking Colombian nose job. But yeah, that's kind of like that toxic hustle culture is thinking, oh, you're just hustling. Maybe you're just creating wealth, but I mean, it's like that diminishing utility of more money. I'm like, okay, is that next million? Like, is that really? If you, are you you might be sacrificing your health or your relationships or your time to get more money, but where's the utility of that money? And this, I think, it's kind of like you get to the point where business it becomes like a game and money is just points, where it's like you're not earning that money like, and that if you're a multimillionaire, another like 100 G's, like what's that going to do? What's that really going to do for your life? Is that going to alter it in any meaningful way? Just to tie it all together, I think this goes back to like taking a step back and saying, okay, well, do I have my priorities in order? Like, I mean, for me, for example, like I have like a 30-minute stretching routine that I try to get in every day. Do I do it every day? No, but at the end of the day, like I'm not going to sacrifice my health so I can get to like a more advantageous financial position, because then it's like, then you have to come back and people are like, they're spending all the money that they earned while they were sacrificing their health to recoup their health. And it's like, well, that doesn't make any sense. Like, I'm not gonna sacrifice my health into my relationships just so I can be at the end of my life. You're gonna be like 60 or 70 or whatever, and trying to like make back that time. So you need to kind of like take these things. But I think, I mean, it's human nature to get so like so deep into something, and it becomes your, you know, your God, or you're like one of like, man, this year I want to bring in like 500K, or like this year I want to have like 5 million plus in revenue. And like, don't get me wrong, I totally get it. You know, in order to be the best at something, you do kind of have to have a passion or maybe an unhealthy obsession with it. But yeah, I would just, you know, tying it back to entrepreneurship, it's like, yeah, hustle, get after it, work hard, but also like work smart, and make sure like maybe you build your business to a point where it's sustainable and it lets you do other things that you want to do. Because what I think is funny is I see these people, they make all this money, but they never took the time to develop themselves and to like learn things they actually want to do. And then they're just doing the things that society says is cool. And you can like see it in their eyes. You can see it on social media that like, you know, it's like the people that are traveling because they love it, and you can see they're like going different places, they're like doing different weird things, and you're like, oh wow, that person's really doing it. And then you see those people that are on Instagram and they're just going to all the same places as everyone else just so they can say that they've been there, you know. And it's like,
It's the
money is
brand.
money is only as useful as the thing that it frees you up to do. So if your obsession is making money, well, cool, you made all the money, and now what? Like, you don't even you didn't take the time to cultivate any hobbies or relationships or outside interests to take advantage of that time that money frees you up to do, you know? And that's when I think it always gets like backwards to where, okay, cool, you have so much money and can do whatever you want, but you sacrificed all that. And so you're just like this, you're basically like a money-making machine, but you have no soul. You sacrificed your soul in the pursuit of money. Anyways,
Uh,
that's that
no,
rant.
no, I totally agree. And I think that it's, you know, you could hear so many stories of different entrepreneurs who were just like, yeah, I found myself with a full bank account. And I just woke up and I was miserable, or I woke up and like, and I just didn't take care of my health, or my marriage fell apart, you know. Like there's so many examples. And I would probably say one of the biggest takeaways I've seen from hearing all these stories and being in this community is to be able to recognize your threshold for several different things. How much money is enough money? How much training is enough training? You know, how much time spent with someone is enough or not enough? You know, it's a balance, obviously, like anything else. But I think the excitement that entrepreneurship incites in people of because I think entrepreneurs by definition are just very curious, and they want to take action to change something or make something better. You know, I don't think that ever necessarily gets extinguished, but I think it gets paired with financial success too often, where the pursuit of making something better becomes a financial pursuit by proxy. So, and that's where I think, you know, you get a little taste of the sugar, and then all of a sudden that becomes the goal. It's not necessarily to fix something or to change something or to make it better, but it's like, oh, if we do this, then we'll get this. So that kind of becomes the secondary, or I guess shifting from a secondary benefit to a primary. And then that's where I think people start to get lost. I mean, it always kind of like boggled me when I would meet an entrepreneur or someone who worked for themselves, and they were just such an unhappy person, you know, for a myriad of reasons. But to see that, oh, you have this incredible control in this one aspect of your life that so many people don't, and unfortunately it ends up being clouded, you know, by these external problems or maybe shortcomings, or just spending too much time on something. Where it's so funny to me to go through Instagram and you'll see like like one thing, like an advertisement is like, hey, the government's about to tell us all about the aliens who have been here for 1,000 years, and like they're all finally coming out and saying it, and other people are like, yeah, but I got to get up and grind and hustle. Like if you're if you're not chasing down that that dollar, someone else is, and it's like fucking aliens, dude. like everything we've been doing could be moot. Every belief system
It's
we've
like that
had
meme.
could
Have you seen
totally
the
be
meme
pointless.
where it's like the dinosaurs and they're like looking up as the meteors coming in? That's like, if I were to make the meme,
Yeah,
it's like two entrepreneurs, they're seeing the meteor coming. It's like, oh shit, meteor's coming, but I gotta get up and hustle, dude. I gotta
yeah.
grind today. Meteor's coming in, but I gotta grind.
But it's I mean, I think it's interesting to show, like, because like it's like kind of out in the open now about aliens or how to take care of yourself or to do these things, but everyone's just, yeah, okay, cool. It's so ingrained in us, and I don't know, maybe that speaks to us as just being such a simple creature, really.
I think
Yeah.
I think what's hard is like, in order to be successful as an entrepreneur, you like really have to give so much. You really have to be like passionate about it. But then to be successful as like a well-rounded person, you have to be balancing all these things. So it's like it's it's the same way in jujitsu as like you have to go from being like chill and like resting and conserving your energy. You have to go from like that to like boom, like full power. You might be going like redlining for 10 seconds until you get to like the next position. And then you have to be like boom, and then you're like resting and then like changing grips and like you're doing more of that like technical work. And then you might go like redline again. So, and I think that's hard for people to do, is to be able to switch off and go from like, yeah. And that's the same thing. Like, I want to be a successful entrepreneur and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get there. But in the same breath, like, I'm not going to sacrifice my health or my relationships. So it's like,
Mhm.
you have to, I'm not sure if you're familiar with like the idea of non-dualism, of like, these people tend to, and as a human nature, we tend to think of things as like dual, like either I have to do this thing or this thing. But really, it's like those things can exist in harmony. It's like when I sit down at my desk, like, this is who I am. And I'm like balls deep and I'm going to do whatever it takes. But then whenever I walk away from this, it's like, okay, that's there. And now, like, oh, I want to be having kids hopefully in the next couple of years. It's like, okay, well, now I'm a father and none of that stuff is even relevant. And
Mhm.
it's like that. I saw something online. It's basically like, in 20 years, the only people that are going to remember if you worked late at your job are your kids. Like, you're not going to give a
Mhm.
shit. The company isn't going to give a shit. Your boss doesn't give a shit. Like, you're just a number on the payroll. You're a number in an Excel sheet. Like, no one's going to care but your kids. So it's like, you have to be holding these ideas, like at the same time of knowing like, yes, I want to be a successful entrepreneur and I will hustle and I will work hard to get there. But at the same time, like going back to the same, like all that pursuit and success and that endeavor will give you is more time to spend doing other things that you would want to do. Obviously, there's a small subset of people who do very well because their obsession is business, and that's kind of where it becomes the game, and
Mhm.
money is points, and they don't even care, like that's what they enjoy, and that's great, God bless them. But I think most of us fall into another category of like, dude, I want to be a successful entrepreneur because it gives me flexible time and hours so I can spend time doing what I want to do with my family and training and my other hobbies and passions and interests. And by not mixing that up, it's like, I don't know, like I have my ideas of like, I'm not living just in this moment thinking, oh, I need to make money. I need to do this. Like, for me, it's like, dude, if I had 5 mil, I would probably just be like, buy my like finca outside the city, like build
Mhm.
my own jujitsu gym and be like spending time with my family. But
Yeah.
I don't
Your
think that,
podcast room would probably look a lot better too,
yeah, right.
huh?
It'll get there. It'll get there. But I think, I don't think that a lot of these guys are even, they're not even thinking like, what would I do with this money? It's like the dog chasing the car. It's just instinct. They're like, oh, I gotta get this
Mhm.
fucking car. And then it's like, they get it. They're like, okay, what do
What
I
about
do
that guy's car?
with this thing? Do I just like hump the tire or what?
Yeah.
That I think is like a decent analogy. So, but like I said, it's hard because you have to commit so much of yourself to be successful in this like competitive world. But at the same time, knowing that like your worth is not tied into this. And there's other people that need you in their lives, like your family and your friends, your community, your kids, like they need you in your life and they're going to love you no matter what, regardless of the success you have. So holding those two ideas together are how I think you can be successful in the term, as in terms of like well-rounded success, not successful in the terms of I'm a millionaire and I fucking hate life and I'm pissed and unhealthy, you know?
Yeah, no, I mean, when I first started speaking to kind of this in Vietnam, I was still teaching at the time, but I wanted to jump in to entrepreneurship. And the only way I knew how to validate that was by getting a business, really fast. And I started selling on Amazon. I got I used to hand paint city skylines on ceramic mugs. And then I found a way to just produce a bunch of mugs with my artwork on them. And then I created the design for the box. So there was a creative aspect to building up this, this online shop. Then came the time of maintaining it, figuring out ads, figuring out how to get better, how to incorporate, my next city design. And that's when I found myself in a cafe in like Ho Chi Minh City with a bunch of my friends who are entrepreneurs, and I'm just kind of all watching them, and I'm like, oh, this sucks. Like I'm spending all day in this cafe focused on something I know I hate, but for me in my head, I was like, this is what it takes to validate the fact that I'm doing something of worth. Like I had to be click clacking, on the laptop or pretending like I knew what I was looking at. And then, I mean, it's a great way to lose a bunch of money. And I shut down the Amazon shop, and just because it wasn't going anywhere. I was just, it wasn't my bag. But then I had to clean out the distribution centers that had my products there, the mugs. So in Buffalo, New York, in my parents' basement, there's about 1,500 ceramic mugs sitting there collecting dust. They've been there for a couple of years, and being, on the road, I like to get home, about a handful of times a year, but I always creep down to the basement, and just look at that pile, and I'm like, there it is. There's like maybe one day I'll get a golf club and a cigar, and I'll just one by one just right off into the sunset.
You from the corner of the basement, dude.
Yeah, right. Just but like I think that, look, college is going to be expensive, I guess, no matter where you go. And this was certainly a college class that I took in real world experience. But it was, I think that the biggest value there for me was just like, oh, I don't want to end up like angry at my day in a cafe, when you walk outside and you can just really kind of experience life more, whatever that might mean for you. But yeah, I think, especially working that hard, you tend to cut yourself off from a lot of human interaction. It could be daily, weekly, monthly. You start, I see a lot of people who get less and less of that. You turn more inward, and you lose outside perspective a lot. And I think that's where you end up. If you spend enough time with yourself, you'll develop theories about yourself or your business that may or may not be true, but you have a very one-sided look at things. And so that's why I think it's, again, coming back to the networking part, it's really important to have a group of people to be like, hey, am I fucking crazy here? Like, am I doing this right? Or like, how does this look as another human being? How does this look? And that's when you hear people say, well, I wish, you wouldn't, scream at people or the waiter for no good reason, or, just like you seem like you're a bit on edge or maybe unhappy. I mean, you can delve into a little bit more in your personal life, whatever that might mean for you. But it's I mean, if you again, like mental health is health. If you don't have that, what do you got? But yeah, I don't know. I'm hoping in this next generation might, because of I mean, I make fun of, hippie wellness stuff all the time. I'm exposed to a lot of people who, do a lot of things I particularly wouldn't care for, but, people who do, like I said, sound journeys or, different types of groups or even plant medicine ceremonies, things like this. I think there is strong enough of a push where it's no longer, the ingestion of chemicals or medicines are no longer through the guise of entertainment or taking time off, or, oh, I've had a hard day at work, I'm going to knock back some, a few drinks or smoke a joint or do something, where suddenly those aren't meant as something for relief, but they're used as a catalyst for wellness, for personal growth. And I'd like to think that this might be a bit more counteractive to the whole hustle culture, that I think is really kind of starting to break. We can really only make it as sexy before it starts to be parodied. And there's an entrepreneur, oh, man, there's a comedian who makes fun of entrepreneurs constantly with this stuff on Instagram. I'll also send you a link. I can't forget about it, but I forget the name about it right now. But the point is that once I think a piece of culture reaches to a point where it's being parodied, then people stop taking it as seriously and can start to poke holes a little bit easier, a little bit more practical, of maybe thinking like, oh, well, maybe wealth for wealth's sake isn't the best thing. Who would have thought?
Well, yeah, I think that's a really good point. And it's kind of like, it's like kind of the idea of like people who are traveling because they really love it and it's part of who they are. And then there's the other people that are traveling because it's cool and that's the thing and da 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 da. And like you can tell when you meet people on the road and it's like, oh, I got to get to this place and I got to see this place and I got to see this place. It's like, I remember when I was in Turkey, in Istanbul, and I went to like the mosque, like the Blue Mosque or something, like the mosque that everyone had to see. And I was like, this is garbage. Like it was not even impressive. And then I went just like walking around.
Have you been to the Mall of America? Like,
yeah. I went like to some other neighborhood in the city and I went to some random mosque that was just like on the map and it was like this amazing, incredible. I was like, holy shit, like why isn't everyone not coming here? Like it was like, I think I looked up like the best mosque in Istanbul. It was like number 20. It was like, oh, this one's nice. And I think that's the thing is like, you're going to meet those people who are, they're like the checklist travelers who are there like, oh, how long have you been traveling? It's like they're like the dick measures. Like, oh, how many countries have you been to? How many languages do you speak? Da, 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 da. I'm like, I do this because I enjoy it. This isn't like a competition, And so, and I think but there has to be like that. It has to reach like an equilibrium of like, there's people, like I said, there's people that are entrepreneurs and they're doing it and they really enjoy it. And that's their thing. And that's awesome. God bless them. But then you have this other group of people who it's like, another day, I have to do this just because they think that's the thing to do. It's like, I think some people there's probably some entrepreneurs who would thrive and do well as employees in companies, but they've refused to strictly because it's pride and it's ego and it's saying like, they want to be able to say, oh, I'm a digital nomad, I'm an entrepreneur. And that is kind of touching on all that. It's like, you have this core culture of like people who made it cool initially, and then you start to have like this toxicity that starts to build around it, whether that's travel culture in general, or like the kind of entrepreneurial culture, or like the travel digital nomad entrepreneurial culture. You get kind of like this mucus toxicity that develops around it of people who are only doing it because it's cool, or it's supposed to be cool, or they think it's cool, or they want to impress their friends. So I would really stress that to people, whether it's travelers or entrepreneurs. It's like ask yourself these hard questions of, like, do you want to do this? Like, are you actually enjoying it? Is this like, or like, for example, like you found your way, you're an entrepreneur, you're traveling, but you're doing it on your own terms. You're not doing web design, not that web design, like, sure, there's people that do it, love it, fantastic, but like you're doing it on your own terms, which is great. And like that's the same place I'm at, as someone, even I didn't even know being an entrepreneur was a thing. Like growing up, whenever they ask you like, what do you want to be? No one says like, oh, I want to be an entrepreneur. They're like, oh, to be a fucking vet or like a fireman or some crazy shit, So I'm just in the past few years that I even realized that being an entrepreneur is like a thing and it's cool. Like you're solving problems, you can make good money, make your own hours and all this. And if that's something that resonates with you, fucking go for it and like make your own way. In the same way that if you're traveling and you're making your own way, you're gonna find like that random mosque I found, like you're gonna find the weird off the beaten path things that work for you. and that you like.
Mhm.
But if you're not, you're just going to be like another like carbon copy. It's like, oh wow, you've been there. I've been there too. It's like you meet people. It's like, oh yeah, we've all been all to all the same places. Wow, so cool. I hated every minute of it. It was awful, but at least I can say that I've been there. You know?
Yeah. I mean, this is actually the perfect segue into why I wrote these children's books. I have books, children's books on entrepreneurship. I don't know if we discussed this. Yeah, a
That's
few years
sick.
ago, it's called Teely and the Opportunity. So it's basically when I was exposed to this group of entrepreneurs, we tend to always look through, you know, our own lens of what we know when we come into a new situation, we apply these things. So I met all these entrepreneurs, and instinctively I thought, what would this look like as a children's book? Explaining to a child what an entrepreneur is, what business is. So I wrote a book called, Teely and the Opportunity. I self-published through Amazon's Kindle Direct Publishing, which is an option. There's a thing I would say to anyone, side note, if you want to be an author, it has never been easier. You can literally type up anything, self-publish, and boom, you have a book, So I think that was like kind of in itself a bit meta, where I was like, I've always wanted to be an author, and like no one ever said you can just be an author. And
Mhm.
so that was the idea of this book. It's like people always gave you options of like, what do you want to be when you grow up? And it was like, you can choose one of these. Whereas like, what do you want to do could be a completely different question. Like what is it that you actually want to do? Where do you see yourself as something or a person of value that can help change something or make it better? The first book I wrote is really just kind of like an introduction to a lemonade stand style business where the main character wants to learn where money comes from, how to grow money, and tries to plant a tree. And then she's informed that you can't just grow money, but you can start a business. And this really just introduces children to a lot of the terms that they don't have a lot of context for at that age. Business, employer, employee, having a simple business plan, putting in money to make money. And so it walks kids through these all these terms and these ideas of businesses and how the basics of an economy work, where if I spend $1 on a slice of pizza, what does that business use the money for? So, well, to support their business, and how all businesses are actually connected to each other through this thing called the economy. Then the second book I wrote, I had two more follow-ups, which were my COVID babies. The next one is about advertising. It's called Teely Gets the Word Out, and it's all about, just simple advertising. Kids are advertised to all day, every day, and they have zero context.
Scary,
They
man.
don't understand. They don't understand why they're seeing pop-ups on YouTube or the side of the screens, or they have to sit. It's so funny that my niece, who is almost 8 years old, is like, "Oh, I gotta watch an ad," and like on YouTube, and just like that's a part of her every day, and having no idea about what's behind those. Excuse me, what's behind those ads? What's behind? What are they trying to sell you? And not even realizing you're trying to be sold to. So just exposing kids to the idea will help give them a bit more context as they navigate the world, and not just be a passive consumer, but more of an active participant in this economy and their part in it. And the third book, Teely and the Biggie Piggy Factory. So she makes piggy buns. That's the product that she's been making.
What?
Her What's that?
What does she make?
Piggy buns.
Piggy buns.
So the main character is a pig, and I made these little buns. It'll make sense when you see it.
Oh,
The
I'm
buns look
definitely
like a
going to get
butt.
these books. This is awesome. I'm going to read them. My kids.
Yeah,
Sure. This is all I love.
oh man. So, and that one is really just about business is going well. She's selling out. Now she has to hire employees, and it really just breaks down the relationship between employee, employer. How more money means more money to spread around. It's socialist at its very nature, but it's also just kind of comes back to the golden rule of just like, hey, don't be a dick. There's seemingly plenty to go around. Enjoy business for business sake. And so, yeah, I wrote those three books. And then at the end of the pandemic, I had teamed up with a couple of teachers who I'd worked with in the past in New York, who helped me create lesson plans. So I have a 5-week lesson plan course that corresponds with the books, and basically doing legwork for teachers, homeschool parents, but also just for parents who want to help enrich their children with a mind frame of just that this isn't, like you have the controller. This isn't like, oh, let's hold your hand and walk you through, all these things, thinking about your future, thinking about business, the world around you. But it's like, what do you want to do? Here you go. And the lesson plan, it all ends with actually, if it's in a classroom setting, groups of kids coming up with their own products, learning how they're going to advertise, what they're going to advertise, and then they do a, what do you call it? Kind of, what's the word? Not Dragon's Den. The business pitch show.
Shark Tank.
Thank you very much.
Den, dude.
I think there is one called Dragon's Den, but that's like
Dragon's
UK
Den.
or something. Yeah.
That's
Shark
like the
Tank.
knockoff.
I don't know.
And if they don't get sold to, they fucking pull the lever and a trap door opens up and they go shot down.
Exactly. They actually get
pool
kicked
full of
out of
alligators.
school at a young age. So that's what they
Dude,
when
that
they
is
really
so
learn.
cool. I had no idea. That's
Oh yeah, man. Yeah. And that's been probably my of the last 7 years, like a project I've worked on and off, but figuring it out. But it's, yeah, I think it's pretty important to me as with my background in education. Again, just kind of hoping that you don't end up with too many kids who are just grinding for the sake of grinding, money for the sake of money.
the next book. She grinds so hard and then starts to smoke black tar heroin, and she goes down a real dark path. But that's for
big twist.
For
she goes to jail for money laundering.
The twist of the story, the opportunity. Yeah, turns out
exactly
they didn't like that. They weren't. No, dude, that's super cool. I definitely want to check that out. Since even for me, my entrepreneurial path is starting more recently. Just the way I see the world and understand how things are connected and how things work has been completely changed. So I can't recommend it highly enough for people that are like us. We want to forge our own path. But yeah, I think we're getting to time here, about an hour. So do you want to tell people where they can find you and some of your work?
Oh no, stay the fuck away. I mean, I'm kind of all over. Like I said, currently right now we're in Costa Rica, doing some painting out here. But you can find all my work on my Instagram, just my name, at Adam Palmeter. You can find links to my books, artwork, my comedy album, which I recorded about a year ago in Mexico, is all on my website, adampalmeter.com. Yeah, and I think that's pretty much all I got. I don't know.
Great, guys. And that's Adam Palmeter, ADAM, like normal Adam, and Palmeter, PALMETER. So you can find him on adampalmeter.com or the same thing on Instagram. So yeah, man, really huge thanks. This has been like a learning experience for me. I didn't even know so much of your story. So thanks for sharing, and would definitely love to have you on again sometime.
Thank you very much, man. Really appreciate it. It's good to see you again, man. And yeah, congratulations on the pod.
Thanks, man.